Gracie Jiu-Jitsu rocks. Welcome to the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast, a podcast dedicated to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and all things Gracie, including self-defense, competition, anti-bullying, women's self-defense and empowerment, nutrition, and most especially, the people involved in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. This podcast is for the average Joe. It's for anyone who practices, trains, teaches, or just loves to talk about or hear about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. We'll explore the lives of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, how they got involved in the art, and what effect it's had on their lives. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to episode 121 of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Marty Josie, and thanks for listening. Today my guest will be Professor Scott Smith, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But first, let's do our Jiu-Jitsu quote. And that quote is, "Our fears don't stop death, they stop life." And that quote is from Master Hickson Gracie. All right, Scott Smith is a third-degree black belt under Master Pedro Sauer. He's the owner and head instructor of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, Kentucky. And I'll say one thing about Scott. Scott's the kind of person that the first time you meet him, and that can be either in person or, over the phone, the first contact you have with him, he's just one of those people that you instantly like. I mean, there's just something about him that you can't help but be drawn to. He's incredible. Just the energy he sends out is so amazing. So very knowledgeable and insightful person. In this interview, he gets into several things, including his relationship with Henry Akins, Hickson Gracie, Pedro Sauer, and the way they've touched his lives, among others. His journey through martial arts, how he built his successful school, and his family, what impact they've had. So I know you're going to thoroughly enjoy the interview. After the interview, please stay tuned for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. And now, without further ado, let's talk to Scott. All right, I am speaking with Professor Scott Smith of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, Kentucky. So welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you taking time. I know you got a lot going on, so thanks so much for taking time and letting us get to know you today.
Absolutely. So
Awesome.
How are you doing, man? And congratulations on your victory, man.
Oh,
on the
man,
IBB
thanks.
thing. That's awesome, dude.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Especially, for a guy who's not a big competitor anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a lot more into self-defense and just for fun and fitness, things like that, and self-growth. But I kind of had it on my bucket list when I got to a certain age. I said, I'm going to go see how I do. And it was a blast. It was an emotional roller coaster, the whole thing. But luckily it went well.
You,
so,
man.
Yeah. Peak experience.
I love, and I tell our students all the time, because the majority of all of our students are business professionals. I have some fighters, but I'm more in the self-defense, kind of the Pedro philosophy, and
right.
And they'll come to me and they go, "Hey, I want to compete." I'm like, "Hey, listen, you might as well do it while you're healthy. If you can do it, and you got a bucket list to do it, then do it." So I've got several people that do that, and we don't push the competition scene because it's not what everybody's there for. But the guys really want to put out and kind of test themselves, and I think it's just incredible that the guys do that, and like yourself, going out there and presenting your skills, on the big stage. And I'm sure you were nervous as all get out. There were tons of emotions going on. And that is a feat in itself.
I thought I would try it, and it was an emotional roller coaster for sure. I'm going to do an episode on that and just talk more in depth. But man, it was something, especially, when you don't go to that many, especially high level competitions, just the aura of the whole place. You're walking in and it's just overwhelming. And It's crazy.
Hickson, and I'll share this little story with you. I thought it was just really cool when Hickson said this. I think we were in Nashville when he said this, but we were at a seminar, and Hickson made the comment. He said, you can take someone that trains self-defense jiu-jitsu, and they'll do okay in a tournament. He said, you may not be a world champion. He said, but you'll do respectable.
Mm-hmm.
You could win matches and you'll lose or you'll come close. He said, but you can't take that sport and put it in MMA.
Right.
He said, if you're embedded in that sport, he said, too many people, and I can go through Andre Galvo, Marcelo Garcia, Salo Ribeiro. I've spoken to these people personally, not Marcelo Garcia, but Salo Ribeiro and Andre Galvo. And, it's a different world. You've got to really kind of unplug from that sport world and go into the cage. So, yeah, when people do self-defense jiu-jitsu and they think they're missing something, I honestly tell them they're not missing anything. You have to understand the rules, but sometimes people go in, and I tell my students, don't worry about the rules. Go in to finish. If you can finish, great. If not, then however it comes out, it comes out.
Yeah, you can really drive yourself crazy with the rules if you're not a frequent competitor. And I love that advice you just said, and I kind of did that same thing. It's like, I'm not going to worry about knowing every intricate, every advantage, how that happens or how it can occur, or, just all the things that can happen as far as that, and try to build any strategy related to that. It was just like, look, I'm going to do my thing, try to keep my solid game plan and fundamentals and see how it goes. So.
And you felt good, though, when you did that, didn't you?
I did. I really did. So it was very validating, man. I'm so glad I did it. Don't know if I'll ever do it again, but right now, I don't care about doing it again. Who knows in the future, but it was just a cool thing to do. So glad you shared that philosophy. That's great. Absolutely. So you just came back recently from a great experience. You were up at the Pedro Sauer Fall Camp at the headquarters. Tell us a little bit about that.
We made a 10-hour drive. My right-hand man, he's a black belt at the school, Rich Van Hook. I love that guy to death. We're actually kind of piecing some things together for a second location, but just a wonderful, wonderful guy. He doesn't fly. He just doesn't fly. So he's like, hey, man, let's drive. So we did a power drive up and a power drive back, and we did everything we could to get there for Jeff Kern on Friday night. He owns another company, so he was kind of hung up. We couldn't get there in time. But we were able to get in there and stop and shake the hands. And, the beautiful thing about Master Sauer's Academy is that you walk in and it's family. Everybody's in there. It's just people from all over. It's just amazing. And, of course, Jeff put on an incredible, incredible event on Friday night because we were able to catch the second half of it. And everybody loved it, man. It was just super, super awesome. And, one of the guys that we drove all the way out there, one of the big excitements for me was a gentleman by the name of Jim Kelly. And, I'll say this to people, man, this guy is the best kept secret in the association. Mm-hmm. He actually changed my jiu-jitsu game 10 years ago. And he's been following Hickson for I don't know, at the time, 10 years at that time. And for you all that don't know Jim, he's a special forces dude. He's legit. And he's retired now. And so this guy's got serious experience when it comes to jiu-jitsu, if that makes sense. And, so Jim goes out there and his philosophy, how he pieces things out and how he explains things. He's so articulate, and he doesn't just teach you a move. He teaches you the conceptual base. And it was funny because I used to be in the automotive industry, and I sold automotive car paint. So I was in the coatings industry. And I spent a 4-year stint up in Cincinnati. And Jim Kelly had a school up there. That's where he's from. He's Gracie Jiu-Jitsu of Cincinnati. And he's one of Pedro Sauer's black belts from Utah. And I wound up going over there. I said, man, I'm up here. I'm staying, weekly. I'm going to go train with Jim. So, and he really didn't know me at the time, so I just had started my school in Spencer County. So I drive over to his school, and I was the Uma Plata. I had this whole X game. I really had this little series thing that I did that was really, really good. And I'm not a small guy. I'm probably 215, 220. And, I gave people hell. If I caught your arm in Uma Plata, I had this whole whirlwind. I would I'd put you through it. And so I go in there with Jim, and Jim's real standoffish, you can imagine, kind of a, military guy. He's just he's cool to me because I'm a part of the family, but he doesn't know me,
Right.
And so we're sitting there, and I'm like, all right, man, so we do our class, and then I'm like, man, you can we row? He's like, oh, absolutely, absolutely. I have never, ever at that time had my butt handed to me by someone like Jim Kelly did, that did the most basic, fundamental. I mean, I just finally stopped. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? I mean, it was insane.
Oh, that's great, man.
He had this laugh, Jim's got this laugh. And I'm like, no, seriously, dude, what are you doing? And he just would laugh, and he would kind of blow me off because he wouldn't really share with me. And I'm like, man, this just sucks. So I kept going back. I'm like, man, I gotta go back. I mean, I've never had anybody shut me down like this. So I kept going back. And then finally I felt that Jim got comfortable with me. And, so after all this period of time that I was going to a school, he'd finally go, all right, man, you want me to show you what I'm doing? I'm like, yes. And I'm doing this. And it was just these subtle, very minute moves. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And he's like, he just laughed. If you know Jim, if you ever get around him, he's got this laugh, and you'll just, he's such a good dude. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, lo and behold, of course, I had a small academy getting started in Spencer County, where I live, which is a small county outside of Louisville, Kentucky. And I went back, and this is so funny. It's almost like I went to the mountain, I seen the burning bush. I stood in front of all my students, and I said, hey, listen, guys, I was a black belt at the time. I said, we're not doing this stuff anymore. I said, I'm not doing all this kind of sport flavored, I guess you would say. Mm-hmm. And I'm not criticizing that at all. So please, I don't want to misinterpret your listeners that I'm criticizing that. It's just that I had been searching for that jiu-jitsu for so long. And it's like, I finally felt it. And I'm like, I said, guys, I've been going up this mountain for the last 12 to 13 years. I said, I'm coming back down, and I said, I'm going up this mountain over here. And I said, you guys, I want you all to follow me. Wow. And this is the instructor saying this to all the people, at his class. And I'll be honest with you, I lost a couple of people because they thought, oh, I can't do deep half guard, or I can't do this anymore. And that wasn't the case. It was like when you go out and you feel a Master Pedro Sauer, or you feel a Henry Akins, or you feel a Hickson Gracie, you always say, hey, man, there's something different about that. Mm-hmm. I can't explain it, but there's something different. So I started down this path. I'm like, I just was committed to it. I'm like, this is what I wanted to learn wholeheartedly, because Master Sauer he is just a wizard at the mechanics of jiu-jitsu. I mean, I just cannot say enough great things about that man. He is insane. Right. Jim Kelly feels different. I can't explain it. Hickson felt different. I was very honored to have Hickson use me as the uke in several seminars. So I was able to feel Hickson's, pressure and weight, and it's just different. I tell people all the time, they talk about that mystique. It's true. Yeah, Hickson's got this thing, and it just feels different. So what that led me to is with Jim. I in return, kept following him, but I kept saying, man, I need to go deeper. I need to find, because Jim was chasing this at the time. He had been chasing it for like 10 years. And I'm like, man, who in the world can hey, wait a minute. What about that Henry Akins guy I've heard so much about? I'm like, man, I'm going to hit up that Henry Akins dude. So I got on Facebook. On top of going to see Jim, I would go in, because Jim would actually leave for like 3 months. He would like go to work, if that makes sense. So he would be gone. So he would come and he would go, he would come, he would go. And sometimes when he was here, he had so much going on, it was hard to get a hold of him. So I reached out and I contacted Henry Akins via Facebook, and I'm talking to him. And I just asked him, I said, hey man, do you ever do seminars? And at the time I talked to him, he had only done one seminar in one building. Wow. And he had said, and Henry goes, yeah, man. He goes, I'll fly out there. And I'm like, man, that would be so awesome. And of course, I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. So what's the stigma that's stuck around Kentucky is, Henry's coming in going, hey man, he goes, I'll just stay at a hotel. And I said, Henry, I'm perfectly fine with that, but let me share with you where I live. The school is 5 minutes from my house. Your hotel is 25 minutes. So if I have to go pick you up, I said, that's an hour round trip to get you back to the school. And I said, do you mind staying at my house? And he's like, no, man, I'm cool with that. So Henry come out from LA, and he did an incredible seminar, dude. I was like blown away. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I always have to share this. This is a really cool little story. There's another black belt here. His name is Scott Jones in the Louisville area. And Scott Jones is just a very gifted individual. Low key, you never hear nothing about him. But he's a guy that we always say, if he would have been a guy at Hickson Gracie school, everybody would have known as Scott Jones. I mean, that's just that kind of guy, you know. So our first private lesson, and this was just amazing. Now, you got to understand, these are two black belts. Our first private lesson with Henry Akins was elbow escape. And I just looked at him, and I said, I just paid you, I don't know how much money, and you're going to teach me the elbow escape. And I was so disappointed, man. I was like, this is an absolute crock of crap. And guess what, Marty? After it was over,
was amazing, right?
It was the best freaking private lesson I was doing the elbow escape wrong. I never really understood the elbow escape. And Henry's like, no, don't trust me, even do it. And he goes, do it the way you did it. And then I would get defeated. He goes, now do it the way I showed you. And he did. And Scott goes, man, I can't do anything with you. I'm like, this is the hidden, invisible stuff.
Right. He has just an uncanny ability to take any kind of just fundamental lesson that you've seen forever or felt like you knew forever, and probably did, on one level, but to just make it come alive and make it into a whole different thing. And you're like, holy crap. I've seen that several times with basically anything he shows.
Most people don't know this, but Henry's been coming to my school for like 10 years, and he's a personal friend. I mean, I've been to his home in Vegas, and I mean, Henry and his fiance Jess come out here, and I believe we're going to go to Costa Rica with him. Henry's been on me about going to a camp, and I just haven't. And he's like, Scott, he called me up. He said, dude, you got to come to the camp. So my wife's really wanting to go, so that even enhances it. But, I was getting private lessons with Henry back before I had at one point, not anymore. There's a buddy of mine named Dan Hardy. He's a brown belt up in Chicago. He flies out to Henry's all the time. So Dan gets tons and tons of training with him. But for many years, I was the most on the East Coast that had any access to Henry. Henry would come in. We'd have private lesson. I mean, and then when he put his, it was so funny because when he put his website out, I was so pissed off. I'm like, dude, you're
showing the secrets to everybody.
Yeah, you didn't give me my money back. And he just laughed. Henry's got that laugh. And I'm like, dude, seriously, man, everything that I spent all this time doing, you're handing out on video.
I know, like he came out with the Soul Stealer, and that's like one of my favorite things. And then I was like, no, don't show the world.
Dude, I got an interesting story to that, and I won't use any cuss words because it got to that point.
All right.
This is awesome, dude, because you'll appreciate this because you understand it. So before Henry showed that, right, we're at we had a location. It was a 2,500 square foot facility, and we moved next door to the 4,000. So we're in the 2,500. So Henry was coming out. This is our second move that Henry was still coming out, and it was me and him in the back. And I weighed 218. Henry weighed 169. I remember that because he was vegan and he was real thin. And so he weighed 169 pounds. And so we roll, right? And have you ever rolled with Henry?
Very briefly. I had a long private with him. A couple years ago, I was out at his place, and we were filming some stuff for my Breathing for BJJ course. And we did a private with him. And so one quick session with him, but I wish I had a lot more.
Oh, be careful what you wish for. It's so painful.
Well, I did experience the pressure though, which made me want to like throw up.
Well, let me give you my experience of the pressure. So this was the first like true experience with it. So we're back there in the back. We're doing one of our private lessons. He goes, all right, man, we're going to start flowing. And I'm like, okay. So we start rolling. We start doing our thing, right? I'm a black belt, man. I'm not a white belt. He's 169 pounds. I'm 218. So we're rolling. Next thing you know, he catches me in a form of the Soul Stealer, right? But he's got me in what we call the chill position. He's got it underneath my arm. So I'm sitting there, and he's got his weight placed just properly. And I'm going, oh, man, it's getting a little heavy here. I'm like, oh. So I wanted to be real cool and be methodical and be technical, right? I didn't want to be a total D-bag. So I started trying to escape using technique, right? Keeping the row at chill. And all of a sudden, I started losing more air. And I'm like, oh, man, dude, I I need to catch my breath here.
Right.
So I start picking it up. I'm like, oh man, I got to get out of here. So I start moving a little faster. I'm pushing, moving. I couldn't get him off of me. I go into a sheer 100% panic.
Wow.
And I mean, I go from 0 to 110, and I still couldn't get him off of me. And you all keep in mind, he's still sucking my lungs down where I can't get any air back in. So I start saying, hey man, get off me, tap, get off me. And Henry has this famous thing he does. He'll look at you and go, well, I haven't tapped you yet. And I go into sheer panic, man. Wow. I start screaming at him. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just need air. And he finally gets off of me. And of course I use some choice words because I mean, he was just, it was ungodly. I've never felt anything like that in my entire life at that point.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh my God. And I just sat and looked at him. And he just looking at me with that look and going, man, you okay? And I'm like, oh my God.
Like, do I seem okay?
Dude, what the
about to die here?
Yeah, what was that? And he's like, so, throughout the years, I started learning more about it, and you learn how to breathe, and there's things that you can do. But yeah, that was my experience of Henry saying to me, we're going to flow, and I'm going to show you what weight pressure is.
Well, he showed me, and I learned scarf more from like catch wrestling and Eric Paulson. So I loved that, and I actually wrestled a year in high school, and that was a pin, nice. And that was a pin, right? And most people don't realize. A lot of people think, "Oh, judo," if they see you do it, but they don't know that it's actually in wrestling as well. So I had a version of it. So his was different, but he didn't even put me in that. He just laid across me and showed me pressure. So he didn't kill me like he did you, but even that, and he lays way across a lot more than I felt like, I'd be comfortable doing, so I feel like I wasn't secure. But he would lay way across, and it was just smothering, just that, just laying on you. I was like, good God, crazy.
He's unbelievably heavy, man.
Yeah. Now, he was a lot more than 169 when I was there, but I don't think it would make a difference either way. He just knows how to apply the pressure to such a high level.
He understands the exact point.
Yeah, for sure. So go back to Jim Kelly for a minute, because we could talk about Henry all day, because he's an amazing instructor in person. Mm-hmm. But I agree with you. Whenever he came out with all that, and he constantly come out with new stuff, I'm kind of like, man. But anyway, so it's funny. Go back to Jim though. Really interesting, because I've heard. It just occurred to me when you were talking about him that Carlos Diaz down in Destin, Florida. I was talking to him a couple of years ago, and I was with him, and he mentioned him then, because I was brainstorming some people that would be good to have on the podcast, and I just remembered he mentioned him, and I wrote it down, but for some reason I've never followed through on that, so I'm going to do that. So after hearing you talk about him, sounds like just an amazing, interesting guy.
Yeah, Jim. Do you have the Pedro the videos and stuff? Because Mike just posted his stuff. I don't know if you.
On the online.
Okay, go to that.
Okay.
Listen, you'll thank me later. You'll text me and thank me.
Okay.
Go. He's got the Jim Kellys. Go, because I hit Jim up. I said, hey, dude, I drove 10 hours to see you. And he just laughed. He's like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? And I'm like, no, dude. I mean, because Jim travels everywhere, and it's like, I'm serious, dude. You definitely need him on there. He is a wealth of knowledge, but you'll see how he articulates things. And he talks about the mount, and his segment his 2 hours was just such money. And just watch him, and you'll see.
Definitely will.
And he literally talks about on self-defense, how to handle two against one.
Nice.
And you can tell he's done a few things in his life. You know what I'm saying, by the way he articulates it and talks about it.
That sounds very interesting, because there's a lot of arts, and I think you've studied other arts before, and we'll get into that in a minute. And I have too. There's a lot of things out there about multiple attackers, and most of it just doesn't work or isn't that great, So I'd love to hear from someone, maybe have some really realistic applications of some things that could really work.
Do you realize that Jim Kelly was a dog brother?
No, I didn't know that. Did not know that.
He was a dog brother. Yeah.
So I had Burton Richardson on, so that's
cool. Jim Kelly was a dog brother, man. He fell in love with jiu-jitsu. But yeah, he's something else. But yeah, Jim was the guy 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, that actually changed my entire vision of jiu-jitsu. Now I'm 53 now, and I've got a page out called Simple Jiu-Jitsu, and it's not invisible, it's not hidden, it's simple. So my whole goal goes back to the gym. You'll see the gym thing. It's conceptual. I am really attracted to the conceptual, simplistic level of jiu-jitsu. And, it's when you start to dive into that, Henry makes it to where something's super simple, but as he covers it, you're like, oh my gosh. I mean, there's a lot of details to this, that I never thought in a million years. Jim is the same way. Jim is a guy, and you'll see him do it in the videos, but he makes you think. And he's got such an incredible way of getting it across to you. So when he's doing a private with you, or if you ask a question, he pulls you up. It is like, dude, you are one-on-one. There is nobody else in the room, and he is just addressing you directly. And he'll make sure, did I answer your question? Do you understand what, and he knows when you're full of crap, too. I've seen him do that. A true story. I've seen him where the guy goes, yeah, I understand. He goes, no, you don't. You don't have a clue what I'm saying. And it's like, oh, my gosh, this guy's insane.
That's
but
awesome.
He's got a no-nonsense kind of mentality.
It's the real deal, man.
The real deal, man. And I said this to Pedro when I was in D.C., and I told it to Mike Horan. I said, hey, man, Jim Kelly, it's his time. I mean, he needs to get out there in the association so people can get a feel of what this guy knows. And I said, he's retired now. Okay, so he's no longer working in that sense. So let him get in here and let him do his thing.
Right on. That's great. Well, I'll definitely have him on, help spread the word about him. I really wanted to get up to the camp. Last year, I was trying to get up to it, the fall camp, and ended up going on a family cruise for Thanksgiving. So I was out of the running for that. So I decided I would do it this year. Well, I ended up having to have nose surgery for a deviated septum. So the timing was terrible. It put me out of the running for going up there, but it looked like it was an amazing event. Some great people always
Absolutely.
Up there. Yeah.
Hey, they always pull. I mean, Greg Nelson guy, what can you say
Greg
about
Nelson,
that guy?
phenomenal.
Just a monstrous guy, man. He is just, when he's showing technique and speaking, you're just like eyes glued. You're like, oh my gosh, this guy's insane.
He's another one that once you encounter him, I'll say, physically, you can tell it's on another level. It's just like, whoa. Even if you're not rolling. I mean, he was just showing me stuff. I was up at his place a few years ago and got to have a private, and it's just like, you can tell by just, when he grabs you or when you grab him, you're like, man, there's something different here.
Yeah, this guy's got some history. He knows what the heck he's doing.
Yeah, he's the real deal too, man. He would, I would not want to be in any kind of encounter with him for sure.
And Mike Horan and they all put on such a wonderful event, man. I mean, it was, the school looked top notch. You could tell they put some effort and him and Jake put a lot of time and effort in there. So it was just super cool, to sit and talk, talk shop, talk jiu-jitsu and be around the organization and how much it's grown and what it's done. So, and I think Professor just came off, Australia? I think he went through his Australian tour.
I think so, yeah.
Man, he's coming in February here. He's going to be here February the 15th and 16th in Louisville at my school. But awesome. I tell him all the time, I'm like, I just don't know how you do what you do.
Man, he travels so much, doesn't he?
I traveled for business in the automotive world, and it's not even close to what he does. And and the thing about it is it's not that you get burnt out at your job. Sometimes you just get burnt out at the hotel,
sure.
Different, and I'm like, he's still going at it, man. I mean, he just doesn't quit spreading the knowledge.
Yeah, I travel for my job enough that it's fun. But I can imagine there's times, even with just the amount I do, that, man, if I had to do this more all the time, it would get old fast. Oh. So I can imagine. So I was actually up there a couple of years, 2 or 3 years ago for Hickson when he was up there for his.
I was there.
Yeah, I thought you were, because I just saw on your website a picture of you, and Hickson had the tape on his kind of torso, and I said, it looks like it's from where, unless he does it at other times, but I remember that time.
He does, but I was there. I think it wasn't his grand opening. Professor had a grand opening thing?
It was. Yes, it was. Matter of fact, because Jeff Curran did a Friday night thing, so it was it was kind of like a camp, because we had all day Saturday, and it was good. Yeah. But the first, a cool thing about that time there, I took this picture and had Hickson sign it, and it was from 1996. The first seminar I did with Hickson down in Tampa, I believe it was, because I'm from northwest Florida, so I drove down, and I looked a lot different. I looked a lot younger. He hadn't changed all that much at all, but it was pretty cool. It was almost 20 years. It was 20 years to the month, I think.
Oh,
and
man.
So I had him sign it. So that was kind of cool for sure.
See, that's awesome because I started around 1995-ish, 96-ish.
Yeah,
So
I got started back then, but then didn't really have anywhere to train. Ended up drifting out of jiu-jitsu and doing other arts for many years, but
Sure.
came back to it about 10 years ago, I think. So good stuff.
Nice.
So let's talk about your journey, though. How did you get started in martial arts, and how did other arts lead you to the pursuit of jiu-jitsu?
Well, it's really kind of funny because I didn't want to do jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
I hated it. I freaking hated it. And it's so funny because I'm a black belt in Taekwondo. In the mid 80s, I got my black belt in 1987. But in the early to mid 80s when I did Taekwondo, all I wanted to do was JKD. I wanted to be a Jun fan guy. And I read every book I could. If back then I had the internet access, I would have been a JKD guy through and through. I would not have went another route. It's kind of ironic. So I went to Evansville. That was another tour that I did for 4 years, traveling. And there's a gentleman there. He's a black belt under Marcelo Montero now. His name is Jeff Westfall. And Jeff Westfall was training and has had Dan Inosanto. He's one of the students under Dan Inosanto, Ajar Chai. I'm sure these are some of the names you know.
Sure.
And so I was looking because I was into bodybuilding. I got all big. I was like 220. 230. I was a meathead. My sister dated Mr. Kentucky, so I wanted to be a bodybuilder, which,
Nice.
that was a mistake. But so I went and got huge. I went from 170 to 230 over a period of like 7 years and lived in the gym. I got tired of it. So I went back down to Evansville on my tour of duty down there. And I looked through the phone book. Of course, that's when you could find everything. And I seen, Rising Phoenix Martial Arts Academy. And it had a gentleman on there that said, I offer Muay Thai, Jun Fan Gung Fu, and I think he put Jeet Kune Do. Boom, that's all I needed to see. I'm like, oh, I'm in. So I drove over there. It was in kind of a shadier part of town in Evansville, and there was a shotgun house. And he's like, okay, man. He goes, I have a rotating curriculum. Depends on the day you show up is what I teach. And I'm like, look, man, I want to do Kali. I want to stick fight. That's what I want to do. I was into the Dog Brothers. I mean, I was just heavy into that stuff. And before I made the stint down there, I did judo in the mid 80s, like 1987 when my daughter was born. Nice. And you realize, or you don't realize, that the era that you were in something was a tough era until you talk to other people outside of that era that when they ask you, hey, I heard you trained at such and such academy. And I'm like, yes, I did. And they said, when did you train there? And I told them at the front of Bellarmine College, and they go, ooh, man, I heard about that. And I'm like, I was a part of that.
Nice.
And I'm thinking, I got injured all the time. And I'm like, so the other students had heard about that era. And I'm like, man, that's why I quit. I'm like, I just kept getting broken in half. So I had this really sour taste in my mouth about the ground art and judo and whatnot. Because I got injured more than I'd ever gotten injured in anything. So when I was in Evansville, he says, hey, man, I do, Muay Thai, I do Kale, I do Jun Fan, and I do this cool stuff called Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And he called it Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And he was a white belt. This is who started teaching me. And I said, no, that's judo. He said, no, this is different. It's Gracie. He said, it's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's out of Brazil. I said, no. I said, it's Neowaza, dude. That's judo ground is what that is. I said, I don't want to do that. And I said, I'll go over here to the mirror and I'll swing sticks. And he just looked at me. He goes, you just want to come in and pay and then have me teach you Sinawali and go over to the mirror and swing sticks? I'm like, yes, sir. So I did that. And of course that got boring, because everybody's over there doing jiu-jitsu and the rotation and I'm over there in front of a mirror. So long story short, I went back and I said, all right, man, I'll do it. So for a year, I was in the rotating schedule doing jiu-jitsu, which I really didn't care for it. So I just did it because that was the class that was available. I left Evansville and came back to Louisville, and I found a gentleman that was in Louisville who was under Paul Vunak. I don't know if you know Paul Vunak. Yeah. Okay, so I
have an apprentice instructorship under in the contemporary JKD, progressive fighting system. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Vunak's real. Yep. I know there's been people on videos make fun of him, and I always type in, I'm like, hey, guys, that guy's legit. You may think it's funny he's popping water or melons or whatever, but that guy's legit, man.
Yeah.
He'll kill you.
He's quite a character, man.
Oh, he's something else, man.
You've seen him. You've seen him when they straps like steak on someone's side of someone's body, and then like does the biting thing, just tears it to shreds. That's great.
People think I'm idiot when I say that. I'm like, there's biting techniques, and they're like, what? And I'm like, no, dude, I'm telling you right now. They practice biting techniques, and they're like, that's stupid. I'm like, call it what you want. I just wouldn't want to get in a fight with that guy. You're going to be wounded. Yeah. But so this he has a different mentality, right? It's all like real. So I wound up, and this guy taught me in his side yard. So I found him. I drove all the way to the West End, and at the time, like right now, I would tell you not to go to the West End, because you go to the West End, it's kind of the bad part of Louisville, and now they know you're not from there, and they would probably mess with you. Back then, they didn't mess with you, but they knew you weren't from there, right? So I went down there, and I'm sitting in a side yard. We're doing stick fighting with wiffle ball bats and hockey gloves, but he wasn't reliable. And I'm like, man, I just, I need something more. And my wife just was begging me not to go because it was just in a bad part of town. And she's like every Saturday, she's like, please don't go. She's like, why do you want to go down there? And I'm like, Donna, I've got to go. I want to learn this. And so between him being unreliable and some other things that happened at the community center, it was just, I just had to go. I'm like, all right, man, I've got to stop this. Right.
There's a story there. Give us one little thing that happened at the community center.
Well, so I pull in on a Saturday. This was really the whole ending for me, this one day. So I pull in and I'm sitting in my truck and I'm getting my nerve up because it's on a Saturday and the community center was full. It was full of people. Okay. And so I get up and I'm like, oh man. So I grab my bag and I walk like I own the place and I cruise on in because I was from the south side of Louisville and this is the West End. So I cruise in, and as people are walking out the door, I get shoulder bumped by this female, like to let me know you're not from here. So I get shoulder bumped. I mean, like, boom. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I just kept walking. I'm like, because she was walking out with a group of guys.
Yeah, right.
So I roll into the community center, and I swear to you, this is a movie. They're all playing basketball. As soon as I walked in, every single person stopped dribbling the ball and turned and looked at me. And I was about ready to piss myself. And I'm just standing there with my duffel bag in my arms, looking straight ahead. And one guy goes, you here for so-and-so? And I'm like, because I don't want to mention on that. I'm like, yeah. He goes, he'll be here in a minute, man. And I said, okay. And then they all turned around and started playing again. They knew I was not from down there. And I'm just like, holy shit, dude, I just thought I was going to die. And so I go over to the side and I'm sitting there, man. I'm like, oh my God, what just happened? Well, a new guy comes in and my instructor's like, hey man, we go upstairs into this room and he's from there and they all know him and, no big deal. So I'm sitting there and we start working some collie stuff, right? Put the gloves on. And man, he is trying to impress this new guy and starts beating the living crap out of me, man. I mean, like literally just hitting. I mean, I'm like, what are you doing? I mean, he's just waylaying on me. And I'm thinking, what in the heck have I signed up for? And so it was just kind of that whole demeanor where everything just happened at once. And I'm like, okay, my wife's right. This guy's out of control. I need to find something else. This is just not working out.
Right.
So I wound up saying that pretty much. I think I went back a few other times after that, but I had lost my fire, if you will. But yeah, it was a classic. It was a movie. It was a typical. Hilarious. I mean, you can put that in a movie. What happened to me?
That's hilarious. So where did it go from there?
Well, I left. And I looked into, this is back, of course, when the phone books were there. And I looked like 3 or 4 times at all the schools. And there was this Shaolin Kempo Jiu-Jitsu Academy. And at the very bottom, they said Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes available. And I'm like, well, I'll go check this out, right? Because I'd done Jiu-Jitsu for a year. So I cruised over there, and the place was packed. And I mean packed. There were people everywhere, and I'm like, "Oh wow!" So immediately I knew they were gonna be there, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, "Hey man, I gave him my story, and I'm like, hey, I'd like to try this." And so we go in, and I mean, when I say the class was packed, dude, he just started the program like 3 months before that, or 2 or 3 months before that, but it was game on. So I knew that was going to be there consistently. So I started like helping out because I knew more than anybody else, but I didn't know anything, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And back then it was blue belts were just, basically the
Mm-hmm.
instructors all throughout. To see a black belt or
Yeah.
a brown belt was like, I mean, you would drive 8 hours.
Right.
Like, oh, there's a brown belt coming at so-and-so in St. Louis. That's a 4-hour drive. Get in the car. Let's go.
Yeah.
It's like, I never even seen I didn't know, honestly, Marty, I never even seen what two black belts look like rolling together
Yeah.
for probably about 3 years into my jiu-jitsu career, because you didn't have the videos and, the worlds, I think,
Mm-hmm.
didn't the world start in 96? I think it was 96.
I don't know, but I remember back when I first went to some week-long seminars with Hickson in 96, they joined his association. And yeah, you would have a few blue belts here and there. And like you said, that was a huge deal. And I didn't know of anybody beyond that in rank as far as in jiu-jitsu. So yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, I was a part of the Hickson Association as well. So at that time, so I got my card upstairs in my firebox and all that, my picture, my ugly
where the
mug.
patch that says
Yep.
American Jiu-Jitsu.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
interesting. Yeah.
Yep. It's so funny, man. You were way back there. You were way back there at the time I started. It's funny hearing people talk about that. They remember it. And I'll say this because this is something I find interesting, because this has been kind of a topic here lately. I even heard it on Joe Rogan. Even Henry said it to me. Because at my school, you pay for a testing. And Henry's driving in the car with me, and he goes, "Man, you charge for testing?" I'm like, "Yeah, why?" And he goes, "Man, why do you charge for testing, dude?" I said, "Because it was always done to me." He goes, "Hickson never charged it." I said, "Hey, partner," I said, "Hickson's the one that tested me." I said, "Fabio Santos tested me for blue bar and charged me. Pedro Sauer tested me for blue belt and charged me." I said, "Your instructor's the one that did it." And I said, "And I've got the copy of his sheet of his blue belt test." And Henry just looked at me with this 6-mile stare like, "What?" I'm like, "It was Hickson." Hickson started, I mean, I said, I do exactly at my school what was done to me from white belt to black belt. No different.
Right.
Everything. The testing, the fee. I said, I've paid since I was a white belt, paid for my blue bar. Because I think Fabio Santos, I don't know if you know Fabio,
Mm-hmm.
but wonderful practitioner. Wonderful. And he was a part of the Hickson Association. So it really wasn't necessarily Fabio, but Fabio was responsible for coming out and testing us. You paid your money. He tested you. Boom, you got your blue bar. Pedro came out, tested us for blue belts. So the whole thing was, and Hickson had purple bar on the blue belt. He was trying to do purple bar and I think brown bar or whatever, but it never made it that far. His association dissolved at that point. But it's so funny, and I tell everybody, I've been on several different podcasts and talking about this, and I said, the reality of it is, I said, I don't judge anybody for anything, nor should anybody judge anybody else. I said, all I ever do at my school is exactly what was done to me. I mean, from the time I started jiu-jitsu in the mid-90s all the way to current time. And I said, if there's other schools here locally that they don't charge, I get that. That's the way they did it. Guy walks in, looks at you for 10 seconds, and goes, "You're a brown belt." I mean, I don't know. I mean,
well, some people don't charge, and some people don't even test, right?
Exactly. They just walk up and go, "Brown belt."
Oh, yeah, they've seen you or whatever, watched your progression. They feel like you're ready, and they just give you. And other people go through a very formalized testing. Yeah.
I think both of them are okay. It's all depending on what you want. I mean, I'm not here to judge anything. I get it. I truly get it. All I've done is created my school based upon what was done to me over all the years.
Sure.
And Hickson was the one that did it. Hickson started the testing fees and the test, and I, so you've got his blue belt test, and and I don't even think he had the purple belt test yet, because a couple of the guys went out and they failed it, but nobody knew what he wanted. Like, dude, what are you wanting? I mean, tell me what you're wanting me to know. So it was kind of tough.
So where'd it go from there? You found this new place, you were kind of helping out, and what'd that lead to?
Well, I was there. I got my black belt. It was the Louisville Martial Arts Academy. They changed their name to Louisville Martial Arts Academy, and I was there for 12 years, I think. And I'm a business guy. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I wanted to be a part of the group. I'm like, they had 3 partners, and I'm like, hey, man, I would really like to be a part of this, because my vision was conquering Louisville. If they would have made me partner, we would have put schools and all around Louisville. I didn't really want what they had in one location. And it just didn't work out with one of the partners. Two of the guys were for me. One of the guys was against me. So, of course you can't accept it. And I finally went to my instructor at the time and I said, hey dude, I'm going to start something in Spencer County. And, I sat down, kissed the ring, got the permission. He said, yep, nope, you're good. You can do it. So I went all the way out, in Spencer County is a podunk town, when in Louisville, everybody moved out of the county. So there's like 3 or 4 counties that everybody moved out to because we're by the water and across the river, of course, Indiana. And so I bought a house out here 20 years ago, and I went to a church, the Church of God of Prophecies. And I wound up starting, I had a club. And the reason I was motivated to do that is because it's like I didn't save money for my son's college. I had a child support. I built a new home. I could go down the whole laundry list. I just didn't have money for my son's college. And I thought, well, I'll get a small club together. And I said, that way I could try to get my son through college. And so I took $385. This is an amazing story here. I took $385 that I got off private lessons I gave as a brown belt. So I would do private lessons and I'd put the money in a drawer. So I took $385. I bought a box of signs, said Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and a phone number, a prepaid phone, because I had a company phone for my work. I had a prepaid phone. I put a voice message on it, and 1 month's rent at a church. And I took that, and to this day, 12, 13 years later, I've never borrowed a dime from the bank. I've never borrowed a dime out of my savings account. I took that money and I rolled it. So I got 13 students off of that. And then one of the guys that was in there, his wife was doing Zumba. She rented a spot at the Old Ace Hardware. He said, hey, do you want to join with her? So we went in and I rented from her. Then they dissolved and I took over the building.
Wow.
Then we went from there. I bought like tiffin mats. We would throw them down and pick them up, and then finally we were able to lay them down. And then we went from there. We had 70, I think I got up to 70 something students, but everybody was driving from Louisville out to me.
Wow.
And I looked at my wife and I said, we're going to lose people. I said, they're going to stop coming. Nobody in Spencer County where I lived did anything there. They all went back to Louisville and did stuff. So I said, we need to look. So in 2007, this was like 2008 when the economy tanked. I'm going in Louisville looking for buildings. And I mean, when I say everybody called you, you had people begging you to pick up their stuff because they had empty spots everywhere.
Sure.
And I couldn't find a place I liked. So my wife goes, I got one more place I have to look at, Scott. Because I was like, we're just going to stay in Spencer County. I said, there's nothing available. It's all trash. So she went to this building that we're at now, and she just calls me up and she's laughing. She goes, I think you're going to like what you see. She goes, you need to come down the street. And I drove down there. And then when I walked in the building, I seen myself signing the lease. I just envisioned it. And so we did all the build out. We tore everything down. And immediately when we moved in, it was like all of a sudden we got 100 students, 120. We were just packed at the seams. I mean, it was like a funnel. You had a hallway, and then people were just cram packed in there. And they're like, and then next door, the guys that did it's called Digital Effects, they wound up relocating into another building. It was 4,000 square feet. So here I'm thinking, man, this is perfect. And my wife is awesome, man. I mean, there's nobody in this business that works harder than her. She is just a beast. But she winds up negotiating out this deal with our landlord. And he's like, little did we know he was going to sell the building. So he wanted the big spot rented. So he's like, does everything we want, man. I'll do this for you, all that. And I'm like, wow. And he's like, don't worry about this lease. We'll roll it over here. And I'm like, we're in. So he remodels it. And, of course, then you go from 2,500 square foot to 4,000. You're thinking, man, we got so much mat space. I'll put a curtain in the middle. We'll have 2 classes. Yep. That's in my head. Sure. As soon as we're there for the first month, I got parents walking up going, hey, man, we need a bigger boat. I mean, the classes are packed. I mean, there's kids from end to end.
Man, that's amazing.
Oh, dude, it was – and to remember at this time, I had never borrowed a dime from the bank.
That's incredible, man.
And I'd never borrowed a dime out of my savings. I just kept rolling the money. And I'll share with your listeners this. Have you ever heard of one red paperclip?
No.
All right. You owe it to yourself to watch this.
All right.
It's a 2020. Go on to YouTube and type in it's either the red paperclip or one red paperclip.
All right.
And what this guy did in Canada, he took a red paperclip and traded it. And in 12 trades, he got a house. They traded him for a house. and it was on 60 Minutes or 2020.
All
An
right.
incredible story. It's called, I think it's One Red Paperclip or The Red Paperclip. So I was so inspired by that. So when I did the school, I had that in mind. That was in the forefront of my mind. I said, I want to see if I cannot do this from the bootstraps up and just build it. Now I no longer am in the corporate world, and I do jiu-jitsu full time, and we make a living doing it.
Wow. What an
And
amazing story, man. What a success.
no, I'm just humbled, I guess is the best word to say. I'm so humbled by how it's what jiu-jitsu has given us.
Man, it's just amazing what people can do, and hearing that, I'm sure, is going to spark, just ignite a spark in a lot of people who are maybe contemplating this, or that's their dream. And because martial arts businesses in general aren't known for great successes and sticking around. If you look at percentages, a lot of them, if not most, fail. So it's great to hear stories like this of not only someone succeeding, but doing it at the level you are, and the way you did it is just fantastic.
We've hit the 240 mark. We got 240 students. My goal in this building is 300. And,
Nice.
I'll share this with your listeners too, Marty. I mean, if anybody ever wants to contact me, they can PM me on Facebook. I give free information. I'm not a consultant. I consulted in the automotive industry, but that's not something that I strive for.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll be more than happy to talk to anybody that's, that is willing to want to sit down and listen to what I did. I don't know everything, but I'll tell you what I did and what I would do. And, I've helped several people out in Australia too. They called me from Australia and the UK. And they're like, okay, so what are you looking for? I said, I'm not looking for anything. I said, if you want me to answer a question, I'll be more than happy
Man,
to
that's incredible.
answer a question for you. I said, but it's all on you. I mean, if you have the passion and the drive, it can be done. You just have to get creative.
Mm. Well, and something that stood out with me, I did listen to your podcast with the Jiu-Jitsu Brotherhood with Nick Gregoriades,
Yeah.
who I'm a big
Yep.
fan of his. Something that stuck out was the notion that they're your customers, not your students.
Yeah.
Elaborate on that a little bit.
Rich Van Hook, he's like, this guy is just my buddy. I can't say enough about Rich Van Hook. He is just he's 56 years old, black belt in jiu-jitsu. And if you ever come to Louisville, I'm dead serious, man. You owe it to yourself to roll with him. You'll just sit and laugh. You'll go, that was the greatest experience I think I've ever had. He's so carefree, could care less about getting tapping anything.
I love it.
But Rick, he owns his story. Now he owns a company. It's a water treatment company. But his story on what he did with his family is so mind-boggling. I mean, we don't have enough time on the air to talk. I mean, I was so inspired. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I utilized him as one of my mentors. And I was like, whenever I got let go from the corporate world because we were a part of an acquisition and I was middle management. So you know what they do? They come in and trim middle management and I was gone. Yeah. So 28 years with a family. Wow. And they just cut me loose. And here I am, 49 years old. I'm the breadwinner of the family and I have no job and I signed a non-compete clause. So I could have got out of the non-compete clause, but it'd cost me about $15,000. My attorney told me. He said, he goes, we'll win it. He goes, it's just going to cost you $15,000. And I'm like, well, I don't want to spend $15,000. I don't even know if I want to get back in this freaking industry. So there was a lot of motivating factors, and I don't know if you're a spiritual man. I am.
I am.
But God put me where I'm at. I mean, if I told you that story, that's another podcast. I mean, I'm telling you, it'd give you cold chills. Adam Miller, do you know Adam Miller from the association?
The name sounds familiar. I don't think I've had a chance to meet him.
He trained at Jeff Curran's. He taught at Jeff Curran's for years. He's a professor at my school, but he came to Louisville to start a church. And when I told him the stories, man, he's like, dude, you got to share that, because you got to tell your stories on how, just the spiritual side of how it happened. But it put me where I was at. And, being able to do that made me realize that, and I share this with my kids. I don't mean to go off on a bunny trail, but I share this with my kids. It's like, you just never know when you're going to be let go,
No, I've seen that a lot in the corporate world.
But, you're just a number.
Yeah.
And, and Rich came to me and he's like, he said, Scott, I'm going to share something with you because I'll give credit where credit's due. He said, you need to stop thinking, or you don't need to think of these people here as students. You need to look at these people as customers. He said, because they can go anywhere they want. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. And he says, you give them the service that they're looking for, and you build the environment like I know you can build. He said, I'm telling you, hands down, the school will be a success. And by golly, he was right. And I even had a competitive school that came to me. He was actually upset because one of his students was wanting to come to my school, which he didn't. And he sat in my office, and this guy was all upset and saying this. And I knew that they all said he was a little bit of a dictator. This guy kind of was playing dictator to school. And I told him, I said, man, can I share something with you? And he's like, yeah, man. And I shared that advice with him. And I said, these are your customers, buddy. They're not your students. They don't need to bow down to you. They can go wherever they want. I said, I know in third world countries and even maybe older Japan, it was different, but we're in America. And think about it. It's like, as soon as you kick the person out, another person's out there to soak him right up.
Right.
And I said, so you have to look at that differently. And they said, I'd heard people talk on the background that, yeah, I heard he kind of changed over there a little bit. So I kind of feel that I kind of helped maybe open his eyes a little bit to that. And this is a guy that's one of my competitive schools.
Man, love it. I love it. Really speaks to your character and your mindset. And, man, it says a lot.
Well, thank you. But,
yeah, I'd love to. I want to have you back on at some point, man, to hear just more of that and the spiritual aspect. And like you said, there's probably a lot you can speak to on that. So that really is something I'm interested in pursuing with you. Let's talk about your family a little bit. You just mentioned your kids, and you also mentioned your wife and how great she is. Tell us a little more about them and do they train?
Oh, well, my wife, who's 5 years older than I am, I like to date those mature chicks. so I always joke with her. I said, when I was 11, you were 16. She goes, stop. I'm like, it's true. I said, man, what were you thinking? And I just bust her chops all the time. But I married up. My wife, anybody that's ever came to my school and has had a dealing with my wife just falls in love with her. They just think she's just the most unbelievable, super awesome, very helpful, just very sharp individual. Our school would not be what it is today without her. And that's factual. And I'm going to share this with you. For 14 years, she had nothing to do with my jiu-jitsu. Mm. So for 14 years, she probably knew 5 people that I hung out with in jiu-jitsu. And when my son went to college for one semester, by the way, he didn't finish. It wasn't for him. She was lost, and she goes, hey, man, I'll come to the school, and I'll answer the phone. The phone didn't answer. Nobody called her. Yeah. And I'm like, because I would turn around, there she was. I'm like, whoa, what's going on, baby? What, because she was so used to doing her own thing, and my son, and it's like, her baby was gone. And, we have 3 kids. She has an older son. I have a daughter. And then we have our youngest, Dalton, together. And out of the 3, the oldest one trained for a little bit, but Dalton trains now. He's a purple belt. And, another story is how I ran him off. I was that dad. I pulled him out of his friends' houses and, wanted him to be a world champion, which I total mistake. I tell, and I use that. That's what formulated our kids program. I tell all the dads that walk in, I said, I am teaching your child off the mistakes that I made trying to teach my son. So, and I've had dads that have sat there and, they're barking on the sidelines, and I walk up to them and said, hey, man, let me help you out here. I wrote that book. Wow. And I said, you want me to tell you what the last chapter is? And I said, that this kid will go away. He'll never be a part of what you're wanting to do. I said, I'm here to tell you. And all that, I've got so many fathers that have listened to me, and they said, man, you guided me, dude. I got a teacher right now, Big Daryl, man. He's just like 6'4", just 240, just ripped to shreds. And his little son Keegan, he did the same thing. And I niched him because I don't really care. I mean, I don't, either you're going to fit in our school or you're not, because a poison breeds, right? One bad apple ruins the bunch. Mm-hmm. And I would much rather have you go. I don't want your money, but if you can see the light and then let your child have fun, as Master Sauer preached to me, then all of a sudden, guess what happens? You have a program like we do, like half our student body's kids. So we have like 120 kids at our school. Wow. And it's like this infectiousness of coolness and atmosphere. And, we have 3 different levels. We have 4, 5, and 6s. We have 7, 8, and 9-year-olds. And then we have 10, 11, and 12-year-olds. And I had to break them up in 3s because we had so many kids, right? And one night I'll probably have just training 70 to 80-something kids on the floor. Wow. That's within 3 classes. And so I'm like, hey, man, you've got to be able to do that. And my wife, one of the biggest things, and I'll share this with your listeners if they have a wife involved, what you need to do is separate the school. Let her handle the front, you handle the back. So I don't question anything she does in the front. Like, we'll discuss certain business topics, but it's like she makes the decision. She'll look at me and she'll go, get on the other side of the glass. And I'm like, oh,
that's
okay.
Funny.
And all the parents laugh. They all, they know we have our little funny squabbles in front of everybody. And I'll turn and walk away, or she'll come in the back and start telling me, go back up front, and they all laugh. They're all just thinking it's funny. And it's cool. Like, it's been a perfect marriage, because me and my wife are together pretty much 24/7. And, and not everybody can do that.
No, not everybody can. That's awesome, man.
And we literally gel with it. And I will have to say that on Sundays I was training jiu-jitsu, doing open mats. I was basically training 7 days a week. And I was looking at my wife as a business partner. All I wanted was the P&L and, how many people do we, and it's like, you know what? I got to stop doing this. So you got to be careful with that. And I told all the guys, they're like, oh, are you coming to train on Sunday? No, guys, I'm not going to do that no more. I said, I'm going to spend undivided time with my wife, preferably not even mentioning the word jiu-jitsu.
I love it. You got to reconnect and on that personal relationship basis, and not, like you said, or you might fall into just seeing them as a business partner or that kind of thing. Co-school owners, and you got to water the plant, man.
It happens, man. Yeah. It happens quicker than what you want it to do. But, so you were asking about my kids. So my son, my youngest one, Dalton, who teaches at the academy now, my daughter doesn't do any jiu-jitsu. She's from a previous, and she's wonderful, very successful in her own right, graduated from U of L. And then her oldest son, he's I think he's in the medical or the psychic field or whatever he does. He's a very, very different individual to be able to handle the stuff he does. But he stopped training jiu-jitsu, just wasn't his cup of tea. But my youngest, Dalton, who's ours, he's 26 and just an incredible instructor, man. He has just blossomed. There's certain people that can deliver material, and there's certain people that can make classes exciting. That's my son.
Wow.
He has that gift, to be able to get people excited about class, to get the good rolls in, the safe environment, all those things that really come into play to build a bigger program. Because, Pedro said this years ago, and I'm sure you've heard him say this, but he said back in his early years, and I've never forgotten this, and he said this so many years ago, he said, back in the early years, he goes, I had 10 of the toughest guys you ever wanted to meet.
Yeah.
He said people would come through the door, and my 10 guys would beat the living snot out of them.
They had to, right?
Yeah. And he said to me, he goes, after a year, I still had only 10 guys. And he said, I swear it was beautiful. He goes, and I just sat there, and I'm like, he's like, all right, I'm doing something wrong.
Right.
People aren't staying. I mean, nobody wants to come in and just get their
beat up.
butt.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Sure, you're tough. Yes, you're tougher than I am. You're awesome. You're this, but I'm not going to train.
No, you're right.
And so what I did at our school is I realized this, right? And I know the Gracies with the CTC do the same thing. I do it a little bit different, but I've been doing it since the beginning. And I'm like, my market is 35 to 55. I know exactly who I want. I have a 60-year-old blue belt.
Nice.
I have a 60-year-old blue belt, man, and he loves it. He goes, dude, I can train here. He trained at another school up north in Michigan, and he's like, dude, he goes, it was game on. I had to calm him down when he first came there. And he just says, and he's a minister. He come down here for ministry, and he's like, dude, this is the most incredible place. He goes, this is amazing. He said, I can train here every single day. And I'm like, well, it's by design. Yeah. Now, if you want those tougher rolls.
Yeah, you can always build those in here and there, whatever.
I've got them. I just did that the other week. We got guys going to the Fuji next Sunday, the Fuji tournament. And I said, oh, Aaron's okay. We got Aaron, we got Wyatt, boom. And I handpicked people. And I just said, go. I said, pick it up on them. And I mean, they're over there ready to hurl cookies. And they're like, oh my God, and I'm like, hey man, get yourself ready. Right. So, you're able to get what you want, but not everybody wants to come in and just take a butt kicking,
Yeah. I think more people across the board, there's a movement and people are waking up to that fact because, yeah, you can be as tough as nails in your school and set that climate and yeah, people will know right away that you're tough and you're legitimate. But most people don't want and won't thrive in that environment. And most average people don't want to go there to get beat up. They want to be able to grow and learn and develop and be fostered. And people got to be able to survive and have fun. And then they will also learn to become tough when needed. But it's not all about the beat down,
People do not follow that. And Pedro, I mean, he's prime example. There's no nicer, and I say this, and I've got to say this about Master Sauer. Master Sauer does not make me want to be a better black belt. He does not make me want to be a better school owner. He does not make me want to be a better instructor. Pedro Sauer makes me want to be a better human being. Mm-hmm. And when I'm around him, just what he does, it's magnetic. And it's like I sit and listen to him like a minister, I'm at all. He's not a perfect man. That man died on the cross. Okay. I mean, I'll say my beliefs.
Sure.
That man died on the cross, but Pedro has always been that person, and he's guided me through so many things over the years. He just makes me want to be a better human being. And I've made changes in my life, okay, on the way I felt about certain things based on Pedro's guidance. And, I can't thank him enough. And I'll give the funny story. My son, there came a time years ago, it's been several years back, but there were some challenges in the association for me. Okay. There was just some challenges and it was just very, very tough. Okay. And my son, who was just getting back into jiu-jitsu, I think he was 20, he come back into jiu-jitsu, and he was kind of sitting back watching everything happen. And he says to me, he goes, Dad, man, he goes, why don't you leave? He goes, why do you put up with this? He said, this is ridiculous. And I looked at him, and Pedro was coming out to my school to do a seminar. And I said, Dalton, Pedro's going to be at the house, because Pedro stays here every time he comes out when he does a seminar at my school. I said, Pedro's going to be here for the weekend. I said, I'm going to ask you to spend time with him at your leisure, but I want you to get to know him. I said, we'll talk on Monday. And so we came, and my son, of course, lived at the house at the time, and he's hanging out with Pedro, and they're doing their thing. I wasn't with them 24/7. And that Monday, my son comes up to me, looks at me, and says, Dad, I get it. He goes, he goes, Pedro he goes, wow. He goes, he is an amazing person. I said, Dalton, no one will ever take me from that man. I mean, unless Pedro looks at me and says, get away, right?
Right.
Pedro has just been that kind of person to where, through thick and thin, I didn't care. It's like, I'm here for you. I'm going to be supporting you. And, I love Mike Horhan too. Mike Horhan has always been unbelievably awesome to me. He is just the best guy. Yeah. So it's like, I feel like I've got this nice little family, and it's just blossomed into something great. But Pedro's that kind of person, man.
Yeah, and that gives me chills when you talk about him, because and you're not alone. I've heard more than a few people say something very similar about there's so many ways he's had a great influence and better instructor, this and that, but it really makes them want to be a better person. So I love hearing that. It just says a lot about the man. And you obviously have had a great relationship with him, had a huge impact on your life. So very, very wonderful.
So blessed.
I think we'll end on that note. It's nothing better to end on than talking about Pedro Sauer. So I could literally talk to you all day, Scott. I really, really do appreciate your time.
No, thank you.
And you're making a big impact on those around you, and you've had an incredible journey. So much respect to you, man, and keep on doing what you're doing, brother.
Thank you so much.
Long, healthy, and happy life, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
All right. Again, I can't say enough about Scott, and the pleasure it was to connect with him and have that conversation with him. All right. Up next is the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. Time now for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. And today we feature the audio portion of a video called Be Who You Want to Be by Stuart Cooper Films.
think success to me is, it's living the life that you want to live and realizing that, like, hey, everything's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be pretty all the time. I mean, there's going to be some, like, rough times, but the question is, like, are you really living your full life? What other latent dreams and things have you put on the back burner that you want to go out there and you want to experience? And are you letting that fear, of the poverty mentality of, like, oh, there won't be enough, or the scarcity, like, are you allowing that to go and cloud what your vision is for your life? Why would you hold on to something and spend a significant portion of your life doing something that you absolutely hated? We're getting to that point where a lot of people are waking up. A lot of people are waking up to the fact that they can go and do anything that they want. And also, too, that, the true life, I think the biggest impact you can go and make is helping somebody else. I think a tremendous amount of freedom that comes when you decide to, like, live life on your terms. I mean, what is our life aside from the way in which we interpret it? We can make things go and mean so many different things. And when you're caught up in that victim cycle and the excuse making, then you perpetuate more of that. And it continues to go and pull you down, deeper down that path, until all of a sudden it's like you're so consumed by those excuses and the victimization that, like, you can't actually see potential. Then I think once you pull out of it, you start to go and get, like, a glimpse of what you can do, what can be possible in your life. You want more of that. There's way more to life out there than my freaking checking account. There's way more to life out there than, like, what kind of car I'm driving. Like, it's nice to have nice stuff, but, like, past a certain point, it really doesn't change your experience of life that much at all. If your basic needs are met, you're doing all right. What are you passionate about? What do you really want to go and do to the world? Who do you want to go and be? Who do you want to go and help? The experience of life that we're on, I mean, it's incredible.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. As always, I thank you for listening. Hope you're enjoying the show. If you feel like you're benefiting from the show and want to show your support, you can support us on our Patreon page and a link in the show notes. Please like and follow us on social media and help us spread the word by reposting our posts and telling others about the show. You can leave comments on the website at www.GracieJujitsuRocks.com. You can also go to iTunes and leave comments, as well as rate the show, and we would appreciate a 5-star rating, which helps us with our standing in iTunes. You can also leave comments on our YouTube channel. If you have suggestions for the show, please don't hesitate to give those. We always like feedback and suggestions. Okay, that's going to do it. So until next time, this is Marty Josie, and I'll see you on the mat.